Detroit.
Hey, I love and appreciate you guys more than you fucking know. I promise you that. I love you guys so fucking much.
Jared Goff is being disrespected, and the stats prove it. Somebody needs to explain this to me, because I've looked at the numbers about 15 different ways, and I still can't make it make sense. Jared Goff, the quarterback of the Detroit Lions, the same guy who has led the entire National Football League in passing yards and passing touchdowns since 2022, just got ranked outside the top 10 quarterbacks in football heading into the 2026 season. Not top 5, not top 8, outside the top 10. One outlet had him all the way down at 16. 16. That's not a ranking. That's an insult with a number attached to it. And today we're going to break down exactly why that's one of the most baffling disrespect campaigns happening in professional sports right now, and why anybody still sleeping on Jared Goff is going to look extremely foolish by the time this season is over. Let's start with the resume, because the resume does not lie. Since 2022, Jared Goff has thrown for more passing yards than any other quarterback in the National Football League. Not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen, not Joe Burrow. Jared Goff, over 18,000 yards in that stretch. And he's done it while also leading the league in passing touchdowns over that same window, with 130 of them and counting. That's not a hot streak. That's not a lucky season where everything bounced his way. That is a sustained, multi-year run of production that very few quarterbacks in the history of this league have ever matched. And yet, somehow, when the so-called experts sit down to rank the best quarterbacks in football, Goff keeps getting shoved to the back of the line like he just walked in off the street. Here's where it gets even more ridiculous. Pro Football Focus, one of the most respected analytics outlets in the sport, just released their 2026 quarterback rankings, and they had Jared Goff sitting at number 16. 16. Below quarterbacks who have thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. Below quarterbacks who couldn't sniff a playoff appearance if their season depended on it, which in some cases, it literally did. Meanwhile, their own advanced metrics tell a completely different story. Goff's average time to throw last season was 2.57 seconds, tied for the second fastest release in the entire league. His uncatchable pass rate, which measures how often a quarterback puts the ball somewhere his receiver actually has a chance to catch it, was the best mark in football. First in the league. And on what they call zero-graded throws, the ones where a quarterback isn't getting help from a receiver making a spectacular play, Goff ranks second in the entire NFL in efficiency. Second, behind only Josh Allen. So somebody help me understand how a quarterback with elite accuracy, elite anticipation, elite ball placement, and a historic multi-year production run ends up ranked below 16 other starting quarterbacks. It doesn't add up, and honestly, it feels like the eye test is failing everybody who's still doing this to him. Now let's talk about last season specifically, because 2025 might have been Goff's most complete year as a professional, even if the win column didn't reflect it the way people wanted. He completed 68% of his passes. He threw for 4,564 yards. He tossed 34 touchdowns against only 8 interceptions, his lowest interception total since his second year in Detroit. 34-8 is not a stat line you stumble into. That's a quarterback who is playing under control, taking care of the football, and still pushing the offense forward at an elite level. And here's the part that should really make people uncomfortable. The Lions missed the playoffs for the first time in 3 seasons in 2025, and almost immediately, people started pointing fingers at Goff, as if he was the reason Detroit stumbled. But when you actually look at what happened around him, the offensive line took a step back. He was breaking in his 4th different offensive coordinator in 6 seasons, and he still put up numbers that most starting quarterbacks in this league would sign up for in a heartbeat. If anything, the fact that Goff kept producing at that level through that much instability should be raising his stock, not lowering it. Let's talk about that offensive coordinator carousel for a second, because it matters more than people give it credit for. Goff came into Detroit in 2021 with Anthony Lynn calling plays, and that didn't even last a full season before Dan Campbell had stepped in. Then Ben Johnson took over, and that partnership turned into pure magic. 96 touchdowns, over 13,000 yards, 2 trips to the Pro Bowl, 2 division titles. It was one of the most productive quarterback and coordinator relationships in recent memory. And then, just like that, Johnson left to become the head coach of the rival Chicago Bears, and Detroit had to replace him with John Morton heading into the 2025 season. Now Goff is heading into 2026 with yet another new voice calling the plays. Think about that for a second. 4 different offensive coordinators in 6 seasons, and through all of that chaos, Goff has still managed to be one of the most statistically dominant passers in football. Most quarterbacks would need years to adjust to that kind of turnover. Goff just keeps producing like it's nothing. And can we talk about who he's doing this with? Because the lazy argument against Goff has always been that he's just a product of his weapons, that anybody could put up numbers with Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs catching passes. But that argument completely ignores how those weapons became weapons in the first place. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a fourth-round pick who has turned into one of the most consistent, dependable receivers in the entire league, a legitimate top 3 or 4 wide receiver in football, depending on who you ask. And a huge part of that development happened because he's got a quarterback who trusts him in the most congested areas of the field, who threads passes into tight windows over the middle that a lot of quarterbacks simply refuse to attempt. Take Amon-Ra St. Brown and drop him on a team with a below-average quarterback, and you get a good receiver having a fine season. Keep him with Jared Goff, and you get one of the best route runners in football, racking up historic numbers year after year. Now let's get into the comparisons within his own division, because this is where the disrespect becomes almost comedic. Caleb Williams in Chicago gets talked about like he's the second coming because of his athleticism and his ceiling. And look, the talent is real. Nobody is denying that. But when you strip away the highlight reel scrambles and look at the actual throwing numbers, Goff was averaging nearly a full yard more per attempt than Williams last season. Goff's completion percentage sat around 68%. Williams was down around 58%. And on the specific metric that measures accuracy on simple, uncontested throws, the shots a quarterback should be completing at an extremely high rate, Williams finished dead last in the entire NFL. Dead last. Meanwhile, Goff finished among the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in football in that exact same category. So when people say Goff only wins because his supporting cast is dynamic, ask them why the guy who's supposedly less talented is out here converting 3rd and 8 while the electric athlete is missing routine completions that should be automatic. Then there's Jordan Love in Green Bay, a talented quarterback in his own right, but even his most optimistic supporters would struggle to argue he's outproducing Goff on a per-game basis. Love has played in barely more than 50 career games. If you gave him a full extra season at his career averages, he would still land roughly 3,000 yards behind where Goff already sits. And in Minnesota, the quarterback picture remains murky heading into 2026, with Kyler Murray now in the fold and questions swirling about whether he can find a second act after fading out of relevance in Arizona. Across the entire NFC North, there is no legitimate statistical argument that any quarterback is outproducing Jared Goff. None. And yet the rankings keep telling a different story, one built more on reputation and aesthetics than on what's actually happening on the field. That brings us to the real root of this whole disrespect conversation, and it's not complicated. It's about how Goff looks while he's doing it. He doesn't scramble for highlight reel touchdowns. He doesn't have the cannon arm that makes analysts drool on national television. He's not out there extending plays with his legs and throwing off platform across his body. What Jared Goff does is read a defense, process it in under 2.6 seconds, which by the way is one of the fastest releases in the entire league, and deliver the ball with surgical accuracy into tight windows. It's quiet, efficient, almost boring to watch if you don't know what you're looking at. But boring and efficient wins football games. It's led the Lions to a combined record of 48-33 with one tie since he arrived in Detroit, including 4 straight winning seasons and back-to-back division titles in 2023 and 2024. Somehow that gets treated as less impressive than a quarterback who looks spectacular escaping pressure, but can't convert on 3rd down. That's not analysis. That's a popularity contest, and Jared Goff keeps losing it despite winning almost everything that actually matters on the scoreboard. Let's zoom out even further because the disrespect doesn't stop at rankings. It extends all the way to the award conversations. Imagine, just for a second, that the Lions go 14-3 next season and Jared Goff throws for 40 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. If his name was Patrick Mahomes, or Josh Allen, or Aaron Rodgers, or Tom Brady, that's a runaway, most valuable player campaign. No debate, no discussion. But because it's Jared Goff, because he doesn't have the flash, because he was already written off once by the Los Angeles Rams before Detroit brought him back to life, he probably finished 6th or 7th in the voting, while somebody with a flashier stat line and a worse supporting cast gets all the attention. That's the tax Goff pays for not fitting the traditional image of what an elite quarterback is supposed to look like. It's unfair, but it's also becoming impossible to ignore the longer this pattern continues. And here's the thing that should terrify the rest of the NFC North going into 2026. Jared Goff is 31 years old. And because his game has never relied on his legs, there's a real argument that he has one of the longest remaining shelf lives of any quarterback in football. Quarterbacks who depend on athleticism tend to decline hard once the wheels slow down. Goff was never built that way. His game is built on processing speed, anticipation, and accuracy, all things that can stay sharp well into his late 30s if the body holds up. At his current pace, he's already closing in on the top 25 all-time in career passing yards. And if he plays another 5 to 7 seasons at anywhere close to this level, we could be talking about a top 10 all-time passer by the time he hangs it up. That's not hype. That's simple math based on the exact production he's already put on tape. So where does that leave us heading into 2026? It leaves us with a quarterback who statistically has been arguably the best in football over the last 4 years by passing volume, who ranks among the league leaders in accuracy and release speed, who has helped elevate a fourth-round receiver into a top-tier NFL weapon, who has survived 4 different offensive coordinators without missing a beat, and who somehow keeps getting ranked outside the top 10 by the very people whose job it is to evaluate this stuff correctly. At some point, the numbers have to win the argument. At some point, disrespecting Jared Goff has to stop being a safe, lazy take and start being recognized for what it actually is, which is a refusal to look at the evidence sitting right in front of everybody's face. The Lions are building their entire championship window around this guy. And if he goes out in 2026 and puts up another historic season while Detroit reclaims the NFC North, the people who ranked him 16th are going to have some serious explaining to do. If you're a Lions fan and you're as fired up about this disrespect as we are, let us know in the comments exactly where you'd rank Jared Goff heading into this season, because we want to hear it. Smash that like button if you think the rankings got this one dead wrong. Drop a comment with your own top 5 quarterbacks in football right now. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a breakdown from us all season long. We'll see you in the next one.